Hey, Sven here. Yes, and here I am again with my build log diary. This time it's weeks 18, 20, and 26. April has passed, May has now begun, and as I already announced last week, we now have a front end ready for you. Basically, it's feature complete. It's still not as nice as it's supposed to look, but right now it's much more important that the features are there, that the data can now be properly linked together, and that at least everything is visible for now. And the first thing you see here is the road dashboard, which is essentially the dashboard that represents the overall structure, starting from the vision through the domains, our values, principles, what you know from the company profile, and below the corresponding elements. Key figures and elements that help us monitor the company and much more. And now I'll just click through the different menu items and give you a brief overview of everything that's available. And with each week, something new is basically added. What's also new here, if you as a user are part of multiple organizations, you can switch between organizations here. That means this also demonstrates the multi-tenant capability, and especially if you have different companies like I do, then it's necessary for you to be able to switch between companies. Yes, then we have the control tower. The control tower essentially contains all the work, and this work is arranged, as is typical, in a Kanban board with cards. But you can also view everything in a table format and then click on the respective elements here if there are any subordinate tasks. And there is also a timeline view that you can use to display these things. Then there's the verification inbox, which is also a very interesting topic. Imagine, for example, an AI agent does something. So, for instance, here it's supposed to create a LinkedIn post, just as a simple example. And then it performs a quality check itself. It does this based on a checklist that it has in its role contract. In other words, in its description of what it can, may, should, and must do. And now, for example, you can see here that there's this AI self-check, and there are two elements that aren't correct. Then now you can, for instance, here, with request changes, you can send it back again and say, hey, you didn't do something well here, please correct it again. All the goals and outcomes are displayed here. Visually, this still doesn't look that great, but at least you can see here, at the very top is the vision. Below that is a subordinate goal that I want to have, then some outcomes. And these outcomes then relate to the different hierarchy levels. So what can I do with this now? Break down the vision, which might be set for 5 years from now, into an annual goal. What do I want to achieve this year? And then, for example, set quarterly goals underneath that. And in this way, we also gain the clarity that when I work on this task, I can always see how it is linked to the overarching goals. There's nothing new with the AI operators, but the role contracts are now finished in their first version. And I've also written a detailed blog article about it, a role contract. That is much more than just a skill and certainly not just a prompt or anything like that. There are actually many elements that belong to such a contract. Of course, it starts with, what is this thing called? Who is the actor? So for example, now. For example, here, the marketing VP, that's an AI agent. What is the scope and the purpose then? What goals are you responsible for? For instance, you could say you're responsible for these two metrics. Then which routines? This part isn't finished yet. For example, the LinkedIn routine you just saw, that could be included here. Then there's the topic of decisions. So what is this agent allowed to decide and how? For example, in founder mode, it can make root decisions but must escalate them. The same goes for trunk decisions. For branch decisions, at least an approval is needed, and for leaf decisions, it can act autonomously. Then, which tools does it have access to? You can already see here, for example, that it can access Slack, Gmail, HubSpot, and so on. How visible is this role contract? Where is it visible? And how many dollars or euros is it allowed to spend per month on AI functionalities? Then there's quality control. For example, this is a checklist that it can work through on its own, to whom it has to report. For example, that it has to report to me as the CEO, for instance. And how does the role develop further, this so-called upgrade? So, for example, if the FTT rate, that is the first time through, if everything is always error-free on the first try, then this agent is allowed and able to further develop. We don't have anything for delegations yet. Consultations is a cool feature, and specifically you can here query an AI person about a specific topic. That means either a very specific person whom you can select here, you can already see a few names, or an entire council, meaning several such people, where you can select multiple individuals. And then you specify what it's actually about and what your question is. And then they receive this question and respond to you from their perspective with their expertise, which you can then use, for example, to inform your decisions. And in the decisions, it's then firmly anchored as well. Yes, then here are the goals. You can simply see that a goal can be under the vision or under an outcome. Or it can stand alone with a few associated data points. Then the outcomes, which are, in a sense, the results, which can also be anchored under the vision or under a goal. Which metric is assigned here? The whole thing can also be suggested by AI. For example, if you say, I have a goal, but I don't really have a great idea for a metric to attach to it, then you can have it suggested to you here. The metrics, they're already listed here, for example, in which values are relevant here. Is it lagging? Is it leading? How often are they measured? And much more. The principles, we've already seen them last time. There are still test data in here now. The routines, here you can see, for example, this LinkedIn post story where it says drafts a LinkedIn post. And then here we see again this checklist that comes from the role contract. And here you can already see, is this person allowed to carry out the check themselves, or does someone else have to do it? Initiatives, these are basically very specific sub-projects that are done once. And as you can already see here, convert to routine. I'll stick with my simple example again. Imagine you're creating a LinkedIn post for the first time, then you define how it should be created again. And at some point you say, okay, this is working so well now, I'll turn it into a routine that can be called up again and again. Knowledge. Right now, there are only test data in here. That means basically all the knowledge will go in here. And as for learning, we don't have anything yet. Decisions, a particularly interesting topic. So for example, again here, what is the title? What is the decision? How is the decision justified? In which area, in which domain does this decision lie? Then I can address the decision moderator and say, hey, tell me how significant is this decision? Here we see it again, leaf, branch, trunk, and root. Then it also suggests the decision-making methodology. I already talked about this last time. And then, for example, I can also consult the advisory board about this decision again, and then make my decision. Intake sources. This is going to be a really cool feature. Here, as the name suggests, I can query all sources and see where any information is coming from. So it doesn't matter whether it's an email inbox, a board where I manually add a task, a meeting protocol, so a transcript that I upload, for example, a Slack channel, whatever. This intake source regularly scans, right now, once a day, these intake sources and analyzes them. It evaluates them, classifies them, and then decides what should be done with them. And in this way, the work is more or less distributed. That means, for example, if I create a new goal now, then the information is sent to all the others via the intake source. The rest down there, that's all not quite cool enough yet for me to want to show it here. But if you just compare this with what we saw last week and what can already be seen this week, things are really moving forward now. And I'm already looking forward to the end of the week when I'll be able to present the system to the public for the first time at an event. And then next weekend, I'll probably be able to make another nice video where I might even show a very concrete walkthrough of how the system works, because that's how it works. Until then, as always, go to rocketroutine.com, read the latest blog posts, which are once again very exciting. Follow us on LinkedIn on our company page, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where these videos are always available to watch. So, have fun and see you next week. Ciao.